All right, welcome to the in-depth explanation of what the campaign is going to be from a mechanical perspective. I assume you've seen the introduction video, and I assume that you are familiar with Dungeons & Dragons 3.5, because I'm going to go a little bit more into the mechanics of it and what the philosophy behind the campaign was. Now, I've introduced the heroes quite recently in the original discussion, but let's go through the campaign setup. Now, when you look at the mechanics and the philosophy behind the campaign that I wanted to put up, my overall goal was to establish a very difficult environment. As you are aware, I like playing difficult games. I also like to play my players to play in difficult environments. The advantage of D&D in this respect, D&D 3.5, is that it just has a lot of tools at the disposal. A little bit more than 110 books, to be precise. Or I allowed all of the books, but no homebrew or third-party content. With that in mind, one needs to understand that D&D 3.5 is not very balanced. So I did an extensive list of banned items, abilities, feats, and classes, where I'm going to show you a little bit of what I did and why I did it. The campaign itself was played as written. The original campaign was supposed to be relatively difficult for a core party of mediocre beginning players. I have played with at least 3 expert players that are relatively strong in the character optimization department. So naturally, the campaign wouldn't be much of a challenge. For those of you who are not that familiar with character optimization, it is possible to play the whole campaign with one character and still win the whole campaign, even if the character is lower level than what the campaign originally intends. That is how much optimization can bring to the table. So I wanted to make sure that they do have very weak characters, and they needed to play intelligently in order to overcome the obstacles. I also opted for a rather merciless playstyle. I always mislike if the AI, and in this case I take over the AI, is just doing like random bullshit, and that's not going to be the case in this campaign. You're going to see very much intelligent behavior. The enemies are merciless and they will exploit the weaknesses that they can spot. However, I'm not metagaming, so the enemies do not know effectively the number of hit points or specific saves of the characters unless otherwise stated. For the part of the lower magical environment, I will explain that in just a minute when we come to the classes. And last but not least, the campaign setup contained no spoilers. I wanted the players to freshly approach it without any pre-knowledge. As for the character creation, so part number 2 now, we used a point buy system, mechanically superior to the roll system. You don't get that much volatility. You get pretty much standard characters off the shelf, and everyone can be as strong as others. We excluded flaws, traits, templates, level adjustment buybacks, cohorts of any source, which are alternative rules that I'm not going to go discuss in detail. For you, as a rough overview, that just means specific options that will make characters way stronger than they are supposed to be will just not be available. So that kind of reduces a lot of the options for optimization. I was running with a reduced worlds per level setup, which means for the characters themselves, they are not as wealthy as they are supposed to be. Now, that usually hampers the melee characters. So in order to make up for the less gold available, melee characters and so-called MAD characters, multi-attribute dependent characters, got a few extra points in the point buy system, which you can also see when you closely look at the effective stats of, for instance, Solomon, who is multi-attribute dependent, or Maneth. So both of them as melee characters received a little bit of a buff from an attribute perspective. With regards to hit points, we took half hit points and fixed and rolled for the other half. I wanted to get rid of the volatility of critical strikes because the players shouldn't be just randomly killed off. They should fight in hard battles, and that is really what I expected to see out of the campaign. We will go through the class banning section in detail because I found that important to run with you together with you guys and make you understand why the character optimization that these guys did was quite good under the circumstances and under the classes that they had available. We only allowed very, very specific prestige classes. I very intentionally put out certain prestige classes that, for instance, had fast spell progression, etc., etc. We'll not go through that in detail, but just assume that stronger ones were just not available. Generally, items with immunities were not available for the sole reason of not making certain encounters obsolete. That just makes the game much, much harder, but also much, much more interesting. And certain underpriced magical items were also not as frequently available, i.e. Amulet of Tears, i.e. Anklet of Translocation, and some other items that are really, really cheap for the effect that they are doing. Last but not least, the list for that is too long, but I handpicked a couple of unnecessarily strong items, beginning from mundane items that were just very, very strong, like Chaos Ink or Shape Sand, up to Incarnation Candles, like whatever can be used to exploit the system was basically not available. I had very experienced players with me, so I knew that they would pull off some shenanigans if I would allow that. Now, last but not least, to make you understand what character classes were available, that is now diving a little bit deeper into the system than probably most of you, even those who have played D&D for a lengthy period, are familiar with. So I took the time to kind of show you what this is about. The classes in D&D, as an introduction, are very much not equal. You will find a lot of links to that system. It's called the tier system of classes. It's not invented by me. Jaren Kay, one of the character optimization members of the Playground and Wizard of the Coast forums, has originally invented it as a means to determine how strong certain characters are. And he was suggesting 6 tiers, which more or less had been becoming the gold standard if you talk about that. There are various opinions about that model. I personally absolutely love it because it gives a great option to estimate the sheer power of a class. And there are very, very long explanations why certain classes are stronger than other classes. In a nutshell, some classes that you will find on the top here, tier 1 and tier 2 classes, are extremely strong if played correct. So it assumes always that you do have good players that know what they are doing. Again, I do have very knowledgeable players. At least 3 out of 4 of my players are very knowledgeable. And so these characters in the hands of a knowledgeable player can wreak havoc and will completely change and alter the rules of the game. I'm not going to go into detail why that is. If you're interested of me explaining in detail why certain classes are very strong and considered to be quote-unquote overpowered or can tip off balance of the Dungeons and Dragons game, then I can give you a lot of detail about that. So please just note in the comments below if you want to go have more content on this one. But for now, let's just keep it simple. There are classes that are quote-unquote too strong because they do offer way more flexibility than other classes and can completely change the rules of the game. There is a mid-tier, so-called tier 3 and tier 4, which is balanced to one another. Again, there are classes that are more capable than other classes. And without going too deep into details, you see, if you look at all of the classes, that in D&D, it is quite clear casters are king. So the stronger characters are simply, the casters are simply the stronger characters. Now, I know that this might offend certain players that haven't played with experienced character optimizers, but just take my word as granted for now. I have played with a lot of them, and it is true, the caster classes are just extremely strong. So basically, in order to offset that, I was thinking about that kind of martial-oriented environment. I banned off all of the tier 1 and tier 2 classes, which are the very, very flexible classes. And I basically continued with banning off all tier 3 casters and all of the casters that do have full progression in tier 4 and tier 5, which is basically the war mage and the healer. That leaves a more melee, more martial-oriented setting, but with the existing characters and also the magical characters like Incarnate, Totemist, Dragon Shaman, the Adept, and so on and so forth. These can indeed provide a lot of opportunities. Warlock is one of the other characters. A lot of opportunities for utility and casters in the campaign without giving the characters too much utility in their hand. And that is extremely important for the campaign, because the campaign can be derailed quite fast. So this is the masterpiece of nerfing them, and the quote-unquote backbone of why the campaign that you are seeing is so difficult. The players were basically forced in a certain framework of characters. The characters still can do a lot, but they cannot be as versatile and as strong as they would have been if I would have allowed everything. So that's kind of the logic behind it and the mechanics behind what we set up. If you want to know more about it, again, just ask and we can go through it in detail. With that being said, I hope you will enjoy the campaign. If you haven't understood that much about it, don't worry. The campaign doesn't require you to completely understand the meta concept of D&D. That's not necessary. For now, thanks a lot, and take care, everyone. Bye-bye.